people who are part of our story. Today, we're speaking to one of the members of the Pastoral Care team, Christine Farah. What did you enjoy the most about working as the SERVE director and helping set up the program from scratch?
I think the best thing about working with SERVE is always the people. The people are, I used to joke about them being, we meet the best people from all around the world. And we really do. Working with SERVE, you have people who have a heart for this place, people who have a heart to serve. They're generally really lovely people. And it's amazing. You know, you're preparing for them, but they also impact on you. And that's always the best part of it, is just getting to know the people and enjoying their company and being encouraged by them and being uplifted by them and having that relationship with them. So I think that's definitely the most enjoyable thing about being SERVE director. Helping set it up from scratch is interesting. I think that's it's a bit of a mixed bag. I think there's really good things about that because you feel like you have a lot of input, a lot of experience. You can really try to build it the way that you want to build it, which is nice. But also within that, it's very much a learning process, which can be hard because when things don't work, that impacts some people's experience in a big way. And when people are not happy, you know, and you're trying to make sure that the program works and you really want it to work and for them to be comfortable in it, if that fails and they're not comfortable, that's really hard because you know that you impacted their experience a lot. So it's good. It's nice to be able to have that control and ability to change it and to work it out. But sometimes it's hard also knowing that it didn't work the way that you envisioned. And you have to say, I'm really sorry that it didn't work the way you wanted, and respond to that and change it without losing heart a little bit. So I think that was the hardest part for me about doing it from scratch, was just trying to make sure everyone was happy and not always getting that balance right.
Yeah, I guess some trial and error until you get things
definitely
so people can enjoy. And I guess you also learn a lot from the feedback you hear from the volunteers themselves.
Really important to get the feedback, and hard sometimes to get the feedback when things don't work. You know, especially when, you know, whenever you're designing something from scratch and you're working on it and people always go, oh, this is your baby. And you're like,
exactly.
It's my baby. And then someone says your baby's ugly. It was never quite that bad. But, you know, when people make a comment about something that didn't work, it's hard for it not to be a little bit personal. Even though you know they don't mean it as personal. It's still something you're invested in.
So what would you say you have learned from your time at SERVE?
So many things. I think a lot of the things really had to do with just leadership in ministry, and that's always really challenging, and was very challenging, particularly at the start. I'd never been in a position of leadership in that way before, so I think one of the biggest spiritual lessons and life lessons was that you are not fully in control. It's not you, and you have to have more resources than just yourself to call on. So that was one big lesson I think that I learned, is don't be completely self-reliant. You have to be reliant on God also, because he has a bigger picture and he's also working things out in different ways than you would. And if he's working it out, he's definitely doing a better job than you. So sometimes you have to stop and let him work the thing out rather than trying to do it yourself and making it worse. So that was a big lesson. I think the other one is also just a personal thing. I think in leadership, you always get lots of praise and lots of criticism at the same time, and trying to stay grounded within that. You're not as great as your biggest fan says you are, and you're not as awful as your biggest critic says you are. You're somewhere in the middle, doing the best you can do, and just keeping your feet on the ground. It's always nice to get positive reinforcement, but don't let it go to your head, and don't let criticism get you down too much either. You know, we're all human, we make mistakes. We do the best we can do. We try and take on board everyone's comments and make things as good as we can. I think those would be my biggest lessons.
So was it the first time you were in a management position?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Was it a bit intimidating?
Definitely. Required a lot of growth very fast. I was lucky at the time that there were some courses running at a local theological college on kind of Christian leadership, biblical leadership, different things that were really helpful and kind of made sense of what I was going through and how I was experiencing that journey. And that was really helpful, just to say, yep, this is a transitional time, because everything is transitioning in your life, and there will be difficulties within that, and that's very normal. So you're wrestling with stuff, it's normal.
People
and just
have been
remember
there
you're not doing it by yourself,
Exactly.
and be aware of that. So that was, I was fortunate that those were all going on at the same time, and I could kind of benefit from that.
Sure. And what made you want to transition from SERVE to pastoral care? And did the COVID pandemic have any influence in your decision?
So COVID definitely influenced my decision to transition. So when COVID hit in March 2020, we had to take the decision, as many places did around the world, to send everybody home, which was definitely not an easy decision, definitely not an easy situation to be in. And I remember the last person going and just thinking, what happens now? Because it seemed everything had stopped, everyone had gone, so really I don't really have a job, which was an odd position to be in. I'd been at the beginning of that week, I'd been looking at, or maybe the week before, I can't remember actually, I've been looking at one of the busiest weeks in the year, where I wasn't quite sure how I'd get to the end of the week, because I couldn't see how I could get everything done. And then suddenly it all just disappeared. So it was a really strange feeling to suddenly have nobody here and nothing much happening, and feel like everyone else did, that the world kind of stopped. So when that happened, then there was a meeting between various members of staff, with our CEO, Richard, and he was saying that we really wanted to focus on the staff and providing pastoral care for staff. We have a chaplain here, so of course the chaplain was still continuing in his work, but they were asking also for several of us to really focus on the staff in the hospital. And so far as I could see when I was in that meeting, so far everyone was male. So I said, well, obviously you need a female. And then I happened, of course, to have nothing particularly occupying me at the moment. So it seemed like the obvious thing that I would say, sure, I will help. There are departments where it's all women, like the maternity ward, that it would be appropriate for me to be helping and to be covering this area. So this is what we decided. Everyone agreed this, and we started to move forward and to kind of figure out, how do we do pastoral care in the time of Corona without spreading Corona to everybody, which of course was on everyone's minds as well. For a long time, we kept track of everywhere we'd been every day, so that if somebody got sick, we could say, well, they were here, here, and here. Those are the people you need to check. So we did this for a few months, and of course that first year none of us knew it was going to be 2 years or more that this was going to be the case. We were all thinking maybe by autumn we might be reopened, by winter we might be by New Year we might be reopened. All of this, every 3 months the plan kind of adapted and changed a little bit, and during that time, as it went on, I realized how much I was enjoying the work. I'd done pastoral work before with the volunteers, where I would try and meet with them every week. But the busier we got, the more that was slipping, and the less possible it was becoming to actually do that. And so I realized how much I missed it, and that I was really enjoying just kind of catching up with people, seeing where they're at, encouraging them, praying with people where there was opportunity to do that, and just I really enjoyed it. At the same time, we were in touch with a chaplain from the UK, and for many years I've been looking at either a master's or another course that I could do, and I could never quite decide which one to do. I was like, do I want to do theology? Not really, not necessarily. Do I want to do counselling? Not entirely sure. And none of the courses I looked at seemed to be the right thing. Either it was too much money, or I had to travel, or it just didn't feel quite right. And I'd been investigating for a number of years, and I'd almost given up. And so we had this chaplain that was supporting us, Christy Smith, and I chatted to him like, I've been looking to do a course. He said, well, why not chaplaincy? So I started to look. He gave me a few pointers where to look. I started to look, And I said, oh, I think I might just do this diploma.
Uh-huh.
And he said, okay, wherever you feel called, but if you want at some point to do a master's, do it now.
Mm-hmm.
And I spoke to my husband and he was like, absolutely, do a master's, do it now. So I looked, and of course, before this, not everything was fully online. But with Corona, everything suddenly went online.
Yeah.
So places even before that weren't accepting
Mhm.
people studying, doing distance learning,
Yeah.
suddenly they were. So I found a course and it seemed perfect. So I applied, I got accepted, and I started to study a master's program at the end of 2020. So that just then, once I started the studies there, then I realised that actually this is the perfect match of theology and counselling together. I don't know why I didn't think of that before, but I hadn't realised.
Mm-hmm.
So that all came together. I continued with my studies. At one point we were doing a video for Pastoral Care just to publicise what we were doing, and Richard, our boss, was interviewing me, and I can't even remember exactly what he asked, but I remember saying to him, do you really want the answer to this question? And he said yes, and I answered. And at the end of the interview, I think a couple of days later, he said, I can see what the Lord's doing, that he's calling you to pastoral care.
Mm-hmm.
So we will look for a replacement for Serve. And that was exactly what I wanted.
Mm-hmm.
That was exactly where I was, but I didn't know how to even ask for it. So
Yeah.
I was just so glad that that kind of came together in the way that it did. It was really amazing.
What's the most challenging part of your job, and what's the most rewarding?
I think sometimes in chaplaincy they're one and the same thing, because one of the most challenging things is when you have people who are chronically ill, very seriously ill, approaching death. But also some of the most rewarding times is if you can minister to somebody in that journey. Very early on, when we started to work together as a team, there was a patient who knew that they were dying, and who, specifically because I'd met them before, they wanted me to kind of accompany them through that very difficult time, through that physical deterioration, and to pray with them and support them. And I would say it was one of the hardest things, but one of the best things also, because you could see it made a real difference to them and to their family. But it's hard. It's hard not to be emotionally attached, not to be grieving when that person does pass away. And we've been there a number of different times where we got to know somebody and then they're gone, where we've ministered to someone and they've gone. We've prayed with someone over many weeks or years and then they're gone. And it's hard. It's strange, but I also find it very rewarding also, because if you can be there for someone in that really serious time, I think it's a real privilege to be allowed into that space.
Yeah.
But you're also impacted,
of course,
which is normal and natural.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that it's the same. It's challenging, but it is very rewarding too.
And what does pastoral care mean to you?
That's a really tricky question. So there are so many definitions of pastoral care.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I don't feel kind of qualified to give an official kind of what does it mean to me. This is its definition. I'm really not high enough up in the academic circles to give a full definition. But I think for me, it's that. For me, why it fits with me, a long time ago, actually, when I did one of those courses on Christian leadership, they challenged us, what is your purpose in life? Why are you here? What do you want written on your tombstone when you go?
Right.
And to think in that kind of way, what is it about you being here on this earth? And from that time, I always had this image of walking along a road, which is great because we're in Jesus trail time.
Exactly.
Walking along a road, and there's many people at different stages on the road, and you coincide with different people for different stages of the road, and you walk together for a time. This I really saw with Serve, that we would come alongside people, they would come here for a while, they would leave, we walk the road together for a time, and we support each other, we challenge each other, we hopefully help each other grow spiritually. And the road always goes, hopefully towards the Lord. But that's kind of it. And I see that it's the same really where I am now, that it's just traveling the road together and walking together and encouraging each other.
Is pastoral care done differently in the UK and in Israel?
I think inevitably there are differences for sure. I mean, my experience of pastoral care in the UK is very limited because I've never worked there in that capacity. My experience really comes back to groups that have come here and provided pastoral care, which has been wonderful. It's always nice to be cared for. So that's really my experience of the UK. I think in the UK there's a lot. From what if I understand correctly, I think in some ways we have more freedom here, to approach people and to approach people of different religions. We always ask for their consent to visit. We're not going to force anything on anyone, and we're always trying to judge. If they, if curtains are closed, we assume people don't want to be disturbed. But I think there is a bit more freedom here, and there's a bit more of a welcome. Most people believe in God, so even if we're not quite on the same page as to who that is or what they look like, there's still some connection there, which I think in the UK you can't take that for granted. And so asking people if they want to see a chaplain, you might get quite a negative response. Whereas I think here, if someone comes to check on you, I think people feel quite differently about that. They feel it's a nice thing.
Do you think it's because culturally people have a different mindset or view about religion?
I would think so, and everything's always changing. So I mean, come back here in 20-30 years, it might be quite different, but from the patients that we see, most people are interested and receptive to the concept of God, to the idea of prayer, to the idea of being prayed for. That's quite a welcome thing, and in the UK that might be different. I also think because here it's very much it isn't provided in every place. Chaplaincy, there isn't really a word for it here. It's not provided in every hospital. It's not necessarily understood. In the UK, you have chaplains for shopping centres, for airports, for the police, for the prisons, for you've got such a breadth of chaplaincy, not only in hospitals. Whereas here, again, not so much. Some places may have a rabbi, some places may have a prayer room, but it's a very different thing, and it's not what we're seeing in the West is more moved towards interfaith chaplaincy, interfaith prayer rooms. Here, again, we're not seeing that here at all. There are some places that maybe have some spiritual care staff of different religions, but it's not the norm. It's not as prevalent at all.
So I guess the patients and those who receive pastoral care, maybe they need like an adaptation process, or to get used to maybe this service being provided that they never thought maybe it was possible. Or
people are often very surprised, like, really, this is your job? Really, you're employed to do this? Like, wow. I had someone give me a big thumbs up. They're like, really, this is your job? I said yes, and they're like, excellent. So I think it's an odd concept to people, but I think also what we see is that mainly people are very receptive to that, of all backgrounds. Just that, the spiritual is important, and so thank you for checking about that. Thank you for representing that and recognizing that God is involved in our treatment.
And how do you imagine the pastoral care team in 5 years from now?
I'd love to see a bit more integration. There's been some really good research recently which is looking at the importance of spiritual care and pastoral care for people with serious illnesses, and just to see pastoral care and chaplaincy becoming more recognized in the treatment team, that there are patients that really need this alongside their physical treatment, and that's recognized and provided. This would really help us to just be aware of where the challenges are, where the serious illnesses are, where chronic patients are. Sometimes we gather this information by ourselves, but we're not part of a team. We're an independent thing that's happening. So in terms of the patient care team, we're not yet in that, and I think it can come, and I think it needs to come, but it will be a process. And so it will be really interesting to see how that develops over the next 5 years. It's going to take time. It's not something that happens overnight, but I would love to see progress on that, and that we're getting more integration, that we're more seen as part of the patient care package.
So you mean like having more contact with nurses and doctors and just build out like a plan on how to care for this patient and just include all the things necessary.
I mean, we have some excellent staff who will refer us to people and say, you need to see this patient. They don't always give us a lot. We don't always have lots of detail about their medical record. But if a doctor or nurse tells us you need to see this patient, then we go and see that patient, and we'll find out what's there. And that's always so helpful. If people will just say, this one needs you. And this does happen. We do have people saying, if we check what's going on today, what's happening, say, this person. And sometimes it's that they've noticed, for example, people often have pictures or icons or prayer cards that they'll have next to them while they're sick. And so just noticing that, saying this person is handling their illness in a spiritual way. So that would be a good candidate for us to visit, because they would appreciate that. They need that spiritual support. And just noticing these small things and saying, actually, you're here. Go visit that patient there. They would appreciate that. And this kind of thing really helps us to do our job. We go to every room. We go and we treat it kind of as almost like a hospitality round. This is our hospital. We're a Christian hospital. We'd love to welcome you. And we're here to care for you in every way, not just physically, but also spiritually. And people very much appreciate that. But we also need to know where the serious cases are, where the difficult cases are, where somebody is going to need, every day someone to call by and say and pray for them, or just to support them, or where they may have questions, maybe they're struggling, and just being able to kind of get that integration, that we're working together with the medical team.
And then to finish up, so you spend a lot of your free time doing pottery. What do you get out of it? What do you enjoy from it?
There's yes, I do. I go once a week to a pottery studio where lots of different people work together and we all just do our own thing. What do I get out of it? We joke that this is our therapy for the week. It's a good place to do something entirely different. Using your hands and molding and shaping something is very different than what we do in our kind of day jobs. You can absolutely switch off. It's a good place to reflect. It's a good place to relax. It's very calming, especially if things are working. If they're not working, not so calming, but if the clay's doing what you want, it's really great. And I think there's something creative about it, and that a piece is never lost. Until you fire it, it can always be changed. It can always be adapted. And there's something kind of nice, it's not perfect, but I can fix that. If I don't like it, I can start again. And just being kind of relaxed about that, and just enjoying the process. So, I mean, we have lots of verses in the Bible about God as a potter, and I think there's lots of things you can learn from that. How you treat the clay, do you have to be tough and strong with it? Do you have to be quite gentle with it? And there are different processes for making the clay, for working with clay, all of which I think you can bring out kind of spiritual messages. It's a long process. It's a kind of life cycle, from making the clay as you see at the Nazareth village, making the clay, preparing it, working with it, drying it, firing it. There's definitely a process. There's a lot of risk of things being broken, and that's also a part of it. And kind of holding things a little lightly, in the sense that it worked out, but it could fall off a shelf tomorrow and it would be gone. And there's a lot of things in there. I think I haven't thought super deeply about it, but I really enjoy the process.